tonight we want to talk a lot about the process, because you guys have been very fortunate in gaining a great engaged audience, getting wonderful awards. You guys just won a Streamy Award, and you're Emmy nominated, and all these wonderful things. So when people see all these accolades, they immediately think that this happened overnight. So I'd love for you to talk about, when did this first jump into your brain, and what was your first step?
Yeah, so Giants started as a short film. I want to say I wrote the short in 2013. So I was robbed at gunpoint when I first moved to LA in 2008. And I took that story of me getting robbed and having this conversation with my mom, and I wrote a short about it. And it was all about this guy who had moved to the city to chase a dream, and he got robbed and he wanted to leave, and his mom told him he had to stay because he had to fight his giants. And it stayed on my computer. I never produced it. I went off and worked in production and worked on a bunch of other digital series, and finally got to the place after 5 years of working on content where I realized I hadn't birthed anything, that it was really time for me to put something out into the world. And so when I really sat down and I thought about what I wanted to say, I remembered this short film, Giants, and I thought it embodied a little bit of everything that I wanted to put out into the world. And so I started working on the script while I was living in New York, working for Younger. I want to say that was 2015, or 2014, going into 2015, and I just wrote a first episode. And one thing that a lot of people don't know, and I typically don't tell people, is every draft of season 1 of Giants was a first draft, because I was in this place, of just wanting to create. And honestly, I didn't sit down and initially strategize all of the things that has happened for Giants. I just wanted to create a space for myself as an artist to work out. So I wanted to write, I wanted to direct, and I wanted to act. And so I said, you know what, instead of paying for an acting class, let me write a scene, and put it up in that scene study, and I'll get my friends and we'll make a show. And I had a buddy who wanted to be a DP, but he was working as a gaffer, and I said, hey, come shoot this for me. And initially we were just, figuring it out as we went. And so we would shoot one episode, and then I would say, all right, James, where do you want this story to go next? And I would write the next episode, and we did that for a year.
So hold on, take a step back, because you went all the way forward.
Okay.
So the writing process, let's talk about that. So you did this, you wrote it was like 7 episodes in the first?
It was 6.
6 episodes in the first season, and you wrote all episodes at once, or?
Over the course of a year. So I would write one episode, we would shoot the episode, and then I would sit down and write the next episode, and then we would go into production on that episode. And so it wasn't a situation where I broke season. I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't know where the characters were going. So initially I would call Giants an experimental series. Because I was experimenting.
Yeah.
I was just creating from my heart and my soul, and I was telling stories that mattered, to me, without the pressure of feeling like I had to get it perfect. And I know a lot of creators are in that space where you feel like you have to write this perfect script in order to get it produced. But because I was self-producing with the help of, friends, and I had at the time, a really small team, it was more so about me sharpening my tools.
So talk to me about the confidence to produce first drafts. Who did you share your scripts with? Who
Nobody.
Did you trust with?
Yeah. And so, but I want to say this because the process changed. And I don't advocate necessarily this process, but I like to share, because I know a lot of folks get paralyzed by this idea of perfection, that you have to have, it perfect in order to start. But you can't have a failure, to launch, because if you're always in that pre-production phase and you never get to production, you don't have anything, to show. And I personally feel like the best way to learn is to just jump in, dive in, do it, and learn from your mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes, with season 1. But because I was writing from my heart, folks still gravitated towards this show, and I believe the audience saw my heart in these characters. And then in season 2, I put a writer's room together. Gotcha. We sat down and we broke story, and we figured out the entire production from episode 1 to our finale. And I really created a situation that mirrored the studio process or network process, but the origin of Giants was not that at all. It was
Okay.
literally me just being a pure artist, just creating from my heart.
Amazing. We love what's in your heart. So your first call, once you wrote that first script, just want to use episode 1, season 1 as a quick, like, kind of case study of the full process.
Okay, let's do it.
Your first, you wrote this script, you were like, I'm good. This is directly from my heart.
Yeah.
And then what?
I called Vanessa Baden.
Okay.
And I was like, yo, I wrote this show. I wrote a character named Journey that I kind of based off of our relationship, and I want you to play this role. And I sent her the script, and she was like, cool, let's shoot. So I was like, all right, bet. Then I called Diego, who was a friend of mine, who was a gaffer, who wanted to be a DP. And I was like, yo, Diego, I don't really have any money, but I can pay you maybe $150 a day. And I have this script I want to shoot. You down? And he was like, yeah. So then I needed a sound guy. So I called my sound guy, James, and was like, hey, James, I have this project. I can pay you $100. And we're gonna shoot at my house in Koreatown, and we're gonna shoot for just a weekend because I was working a 9 to 5 at the time. So I had my lead actress, I had my DP, and I had my sound guy, and we started production.
And you shot where? What was your location?
My apartment
There
in
you go.
Koreatown.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So you did this all pretty guerrilla style for season 1. What were the mistakes that you made in season 1, and why did you change it for season 2?
Yeah, so I would say, one big mistake, I would say was season 1, and it was a learning experience. For me was that I was directing as well as starring in the show. And for me, that was a mistake because it was so much to juggle. And again, creating a gym, wanting to work out, wanting to give myself this opportunity to kind of wear multiple hats, to really decide, hey, do I want to do this? Do I want to direct content that I'm also acting in? And I learned through doing season 1 that I do not want to do this. And so, I fixed that season 2 by bringing on a team of directors. And so I did not direct at all season 2. And actually 2 of my directors are here today, Jay and Takira. So for me, that was the biggest thing. And I got the opportunity to see my performance improve. Season 2, not having to worry about what was going on the monitor and not having to set up shots. And so that was one. I would say the second thing, the story really improved. Our arcs improved. The journey of these characters went in a direction that I'm more proud of in season 2 because we actually created a writer's room. I want to say before we went into production on episode 201, we had 7 drafts. And so I really got the opportunity to see how the writing process and rewriting is so important, in order to
7 drafts of, as in the 7 episodes for season 2, or
7 drafts of episode 201.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So before we went into production, there were 7 drafts, and so I would say each draft went through about 5 to 7. Revisions before we actually went into production. And that improved our overall story and our arcs for our characters. Then in addition, we put a whole team together. From our producing team grew, we put a branding and a marketing team, and so we were able to amplify the show in a greater way, from season 1 to season 2. So just overall, I built the team. And I was able to build the team because I had a product. Because season 1 existed, and people were able to look at it and say, okay, I like this, I see what you're doing. And you're actually serious about finishing, because a lot of folks start but don't finish. And I know a lot of actors, directors, producers who sign up for independent projects, and then they feel like they wasted their time because the project may die on the editing room floor, and it may never see the light of day.
Yes, it does happen. It is not awesome. So wait a minute. Okay, so season 1, you took a year to write and shoot each one, really dictated by your availability with your 9 to 5 and all of these things. And when did you decide to put it on YouTube? Like, what was your process in thinking about where this should go?
Yeah, so I was obsessed with Sundance. So when we finished season 1 of Giants, Sundance had just launched their episodic competition, as you know, because you guys had a project.
We did.
And so I had been going to Sundance religiously for like 4 years straight. And I really wanted to have a project in Sundance. And so when I learned that Sundance was now accepting episodic content, I felt like, okay, this is my opportunity, to have a project, film at this festival that I've grown to love. And so I submitted it, and we did not get in, and I was heartbroken. And I took about 3 days to grieve, that loss, because for me, that was the strategy. It was get this project in Sundance, and Sundance will propel Giants to a place where people will want to watch it, we will get press, and it'll find a home because it was in Sundance. So when Sundance didn't happen, I really had to sit down and figure out, okay, what's next? And I had a great relationship with Issa Rae. I had 2 other shows that I had worked on that was already on Issa's YouTube channel. And so it was a natural, just a natural ask of, hey, can I put this up on the channel? And at the time I would say it was either Black and Sexy TV or it was Issa Rae's YouTube, when you talked about creating digital content and putting it on a platform that had a built-in audience. And I also had learned from doing other digital series that that's essential, that's important, because it's an uphill battle when you're creating a show and you're starting your own YouTube channel from scratch. And you're trying to get folks to come and watch your show when there's so much competition. The market is extremely saturated, and oftentimes as an independent filmmaker, you don't have the budget to do mass marketing. And so it was essential that the show live on a platform that had a built-in audience. And at the time, I want to say Issa Rae's YouTube had about 250,000 subscribers. So I knew at least 250,000 people would get notified as soon as this content went up.
A super engaged
audience,
people.
yeah. And so I literally just sent an email to Issa and said, hey, I have this show, and I had the entire season completed. All 6 episodes were done, in the can, edited, ready to go. I sent her the pilot, and she was like, yeah, we'll put it up. And we launched the end of January of 2016.
Right. And were you scared?
Yes. I used to have this fear that I would do all of this work and nobody would give a fuck, right? Because that had happened to me before. We all know that experience, right? You create a project and you're like, yo, this is gonna be bomb. Yo, this is gonna go places. This is gonna put me on the map. And you press upload and you're waiting on the numbers to go up. And you're like, all right, let me refresh. I only got 5 views. And so that was a fear because I had done 5 or 6 other digital series prior to Giants. And some had had more success than others, but I know the experience of putting your heart into something and it not take off the way you dreamt. You create this project and it doesn't become the next Awkward Black Girl. And you're not getting calls from HBO and you're like, well, what the fuck, I thought this thing was gonna lead me to, a place where I'm getting, calls from studios and from networks. And so that was a fear, of mine. But in addition, I had listened to this speech by Ava DuVernay. She was at South by Southwest.
What other Ava is there?
Right, by Ava, just Ava. And Ava talked about setting the intention behind your attention and how important that is with anything that you do as a creative. Like, you have to decide what's the intention, because oftentimes you can't control what's gonna happen. Like, you can't make things go viral. You don't know what audiences are necessarily gonna gravitate to. And so as a filmmaker, to kind of mitigate your disappointment, you have to decide, why did I make this content? And so I made it very clear for myself that the purpose of Giants was to touch the heart of men, that I wanted this show to reach people, to help people, for people to see themselves, whether they're struggling with mental illness or they're struggling with their sexuality. And I said, if this show reaches, if it finds this audience, even if it's a niche audience, then that is my ultimate, intention. And so that's how I kind of released this pressure of it being this breakout success and doing extreme numbers online.
Right.
I released that, yeah.
Good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you had it on this great platform. Why do you think, because, people always ask the question, like, how, and you mentioned this, like, how do you create viral content? How do you make it so that people are telling their friends and watching every episode? What do you think made people engage in that first season? And did you do anything in terms of marketing, working with Issa's team to put more promotion around it?
Yeah, I think the thing about Giants is the show is so authentic. And I think it's different than anything that's currently out in the market. We really weren't seeing people of color dealing with mental illness. We weren't really seeing men of color really dealing with their sexuality in a way that a day was dealing with, and we hadn't seen a character like Malachi. Like, black men weren't given the opportunity to be sexually ambiguous. We don't get the opportunity on screen, and we don't get that opportunity in real life. And you had these three characters that were just very different than characters that were currently on television and film, or in just the digital space altogether. And so I think that was the key ingredient that made people gravitate towards the show. And we would constantly get messages from viewers saying that this show had gave them a way to show like their friends and family what it looks like to be manic depressive, and they hadn't had that before. Or I had some guys reach out and say this show helped them come out to their mom or to their dad. They sat down and watched Giants with their family, and through a day's storyline and how Malachi was able to deal with his friend, it made it a bit easier to talk to the people in their lives. And so we had some really key ingredients, and I had learned even from, you look at like Insecure and the success of like Atlanta, it's like this whole idea of just being authentic, and we want to see different varieties of the black experience. And I think Giants did that for audiences. In terms of the marketing, I had worked as a digital producer for a network, and so I understood how to market, content to get people to tune in. And so we had a concentration on creating content to support our episodes. And so we would do behind the scenes, we would do a live show, we were active on social. We have a whole social team that would create social calendars, and so we knew everything that was going up from Monday to Friday. So we were very direct and just attentive with or specific with our digital content. But in addition, we took it off of the internet. I think a lot of folks just rely on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram to promote and market their content, but we all know that these spaces are extremely saturated, and you have to figure out a way to touch the people. And so for us, we planned screenings around the country. We went to Art Basel in Miami. We planned a screening in New York. We went to NYU. We went to Atlanta and screened at Morehouse. We went to DC and we screened at Landmark Cinema for the community. We went to Hampton. We went to Howard. Yeah, we went into hustle mode. And I just looked at what studios would do. When you guys put out a film, you do screenings, you do pre-screenings, because we know word of mouth is really the best marketing. And so if people can come out and they can see it for themselves, and then also have the opportunity to meet the filmmakers and have a one-on-one interaction and connection, they're more inclined to then go and talk about this content and to share it with their friends and family.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with short films, and you do a short film and you wanted to get into all these festivals. Now let's talk about real talk, though. How did you pay for this? Like real.
Right.
So you're still working your 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
You're still working for your 9 to 5
coins.
job.
Right. Okay.
How are you utilizing your networks to get to Art Basel, which is super fancy?
Yes. Okay.
And all of the other things.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the money. So season 1 was out of pocket. I had my producer, Takira, who's on the front row. Me and her dug in, and we made it happen.
Shout out to Takira.
Season 1 to get it in the can, and then we launched the Indiegogo campaign. We got it in the can, and we was like, all right, we need money to pay for editing and for color correction and the sound mix, and so we did an Indiegogo campaign, and we raised $10,000 to pay for post-production, and then we put season 1 out. The day that the finale launched.
Which, by the way, that's pretty significant. I think I know some like indie film projects that wish that they had $10,000 for a post.
We were blessed. But we also had 6 episodes. So essentially we were doing 6, at the time, like 20-minute episodes. So we had a lot of content, to go through the post process. And then the day the finale launched, I put up a video at the top of the finale that said, hey, this is the last episode. If you've enjoyed this content, please visit giantsseries.com to donate to our season 2. And so those that I think at the time we were averaging around like close to 100,000 views on the episode. So we had 100,000 people who I knew was going to watch this episode who could immediately go and donate. And so we raised 17,000 off our season 2 Indiegogo, and that was our startup capital. We then brought on a second producer, CJ Faison, who's in the front row. And
Hi, CJ.
Our producing team, we aggressively went after product placement and brand sponsorship for our second season. So we put a deck together and we went after brands that aligned with our core viewing audience. The beautiful thing about being on YouTube is you get back-end analytics. You can say, look, we are 80% African-American women. They live in Atlanta, DC, Chicago. They're between the ages of 18 and 35. And then you can go to brands like Miss Jessie's and Camille Rose, or the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, who are looking to target this very specific demo. And then also being on Issa Rae's YouTube channel, we could say, you know, there are now 300,000 subscribers. We're averaging over 100,000 views per episode. Here's an opportunity to place your product within our show. And we also take the show on the road. And so we can wrap your brand around our viewing parties. We can wrap your brand within our live show.
I'm glad you mentioned the analytics, which I think people forget about, which is so helpful with social media and putting your stuff directly online in direct audiences. So you utilize these analytics.
Yeah.
All of your socials, including the YouTube channel, which means you probably had decks on decks on decks.
Yep.
And I say that in terms of presentations that you really need to put together. One of the things that all of the creators that I work with, before we agree to work on a project, I want to see a visual deck of what this show is in your brain. And so being able to visually present things in addition to then tying it once it's out there to the numbers and the metrics of your audience is super helpful. So whether or not, if you don't have those PowerPoint or deck making skills, building your team as you have done so well with folks who can, like CJ, so you can, you know, move forward and get those brands and get your vision out there and execute. It's really important.
And then, you know, I went to business school. And so we were able to tap into our friends who were working in the marketing department or who worked for brands that really aligned with our viewing audience. And so we tapped into our tribe, you know, our friends from school. But then in addition, I did a lot of cold outreach. I would go on Facebook and literally hit up brands. So a great tip is that most companies want to keep their response rate up on their Facebook page, and so somebody will respond to you. I reached out to like Talkspace, which was an online therapy app, and ended up getting to the CEO of the company. Someone reached out and said, hey, reach out to this person. And before I knew it, I was talking to the CEO about the possibility of integrating their product within our show. And so you just gotta, like you said, have the deck, have something to show, and then do the work. Treat it like a job.
That's awesome. Okay, so many things. So you started to like really get right and super professional in the second season. You talked about putting together your writer's room. Talk to me about the casting process and how that changed for the second season, and how did you go about that?
Yeah, so most of Giants is casted with my friends. You know, being an actor in LA, you're constantly surrounded by other really talented actors because we're putting scenes on, we're doing auditions together, we're doing scene studies, you know, together. And so most of the cast was an easy phone call. But in addition, all of these actors were also members of SAG. And so we had to start the SAG signatory process in order for them to even be a part of the show. And so that was important from the element of having also great producers to manage, you know, this entire process. But working with...
Hold on a second. Do you guys know what the SAG signatory process is? Are we saying words that don't make sense?
Should I explain?
Okay, explain.
Yeah.
Go
okay,
ahead.
Yeah, so let's say you have a digital series and you want it to be SAG signatory. And that means you reach out to SAG and they have a new media department, and you fill out a contract or an application. And within this application, you answer questions like who's the production company, what's your budget, you do a preliminary cast sheet saying, hey, I'm gonna have James and Vanessa and Sean, in the show, and these are their SAG numbers. You give them a schedule, and then you are then assigned a SAG rep. And so our SAG rep is Cam, who's here today, and then SAG will send you all of the additional documents and paperwork that you need to officially be a SAG-approved project. And being a SAG-approved project means that you can then hire SAG actors to work on your project. And so for anybody who's in the union, technically you're not supposed to work on a production unless it's SAG. And so once you become union, you can't work on non-union projects. And so as a production, if we want to use union actors, we have to make our project SAG signatory.
It's really, really important. Yes. I'm sure there's a lot of actors in the crowd, but it's really important because it really helps legitimize your production and makes actors feel like they're in a safe space, that you're following standard rules and you're not just going crazy in the production process and abusing people in terms of time and all of these things. And I just want to make it clear that you don't necessarily have to be a production company. I have been utilizing SAG's resources since 2007, creating short films, producing all kinds of short form series, and you can be a signatory as an individual producer or as a production company and all of those good things. So it's a good thing and it's important.
And SAG is extremely helpful. So if you have any questions, you can get someone on the phone, you can shoot an email, and the paperwork isn't too crazy. However, you do have to be organized throughout your production in terms of filling out Exhibit Gs, which is basically time cards for your actors where they sign in and they sign out, and it's pretty much documenting their hours. You do have to do a SAG contract, with your actors. But the great thing is, if you're a small production, and let's say you don't have a lot of money, and most of the time when you're making a digital series, you don't have a lot of money, you can do deferred payment agreements. So you don't have to pay your actors up front. You can have them sign an agreement that says, in the event that this production makes money, then you will be paid wherever you negotiate, with your actors. And so you also don't have that SAG minimum that sometimes governs, projects with a bigger budget.
Yeah, and the new media department, it's not a whole lot of folks in that department, I don't think. So they get swamped with a lot of stuff. Just keep calling them. If you don't get a response, you'll be like, hey, it's me again. Okay, cool. So casting. So did you cast any new people?
Oh,
that weren't
yeah.
your
So
friends?
I'm sorry. So yeah, with season 2, we actually did put out a casting call. We utilized Actors Access and LA Casting to put out casting notices. We held a few auditions. We actually found our Quasi, for those of you guys who have seen Giants, through a casting process, and yeah. So I would say. Half of the actors were returning, from season 1, and then the other half we found through a variety of just friends, reaching out to folks like Jay August, who's a writer director on the show, has a group of really talented veteran actors who he reached out to come and grace our project. So it was a lot of friends, and then also some castings here and there.
Sweet. So talk to me about your decision, or how you've thought about how Giants continues to live. Will it stay as a digital series? Are you interested in going the traditional TV route? You kind of had your own TV experience in how you structured the second season. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm completely open. I'm an open book at this point in terms of what the universe decides to bring, me.
Reason of you.
Yeah, and so I'm in a place where I'm not chasing anything with Giants in terms of a TV deal. I would love to continue Giants in a way where we can hold on to our actors, hold on to our writers, our directors, and our producers. But we know that going the television route, oftentimes you have to, sacrifice some folks, and also you have to redevelop. And so because we've put in so much time, work and energy into the project for the last 2 seasons, we have been exploring opportunities to continue it where we can retain everyone who has given their time and talents and energies, to the show. And so we're looking at other digital platforms. In addition, I'm exploring the...
Like what?
Other digital platforms?
Yeah. We gotta get specific.
Okay.
People are here for a reason. They want information.
Okay, so there's this platform called Rain. It's a new OTT platform that actually made an offer. Giants wanted to do a 3rd season, but they didn't have enough money. So Rain is one. I would say another is continuing to keep it on Issa Rae's YouTube channel. Okay. But the struggle with that is finding the funding. We could go out and we could fund a 3rd season again, similar to how we did a 2nd season, but it's a lot of work, right? And it's also trying to figure out the return on the investment. So we go and we raise 6 figures, we shoot this show, but even with 6 figures, most of that, a majority of that has to go towards production in order to get this amount of production value on screen. And so there's really not much left to offer a salary. And Giants has now become my full-time job. And so I'm literally working on this show 12 to 12. I mean, 12 to, what am I talking about? 12 to 12. I'm working on this show 24, sometimes hours, not 24 hours a day. That's a lie. I'm working on this show all day. I'm trying to set I'm working on this show 12, 13, 14 hours a day. And so at this point, for me, it's about figuring out what the return on the investment is, because it is an investment, it is a business, and the digital space is still tricky, as you know. I mean, we could talk about, you guys have produced quite a bit of digital series that you guys have had to figure out how to navigate. And so can we talk about what are the potential homes or platforms? Because maybe you can suggest a potential home for Giants to live. Because outside of YouTube, outside of where can our shows live?
Yes, the digital space is an ever-changing market. I think the good news is that even though this is a digital series of yours, it is kind of like traditional episodic television. Like all of your episodes are basically a half hour in terms of time frame. So I think with the subject matter and the content, I would look more towards the Netflixes of the world and the Hulus and things like that. Just because YouTube Red and Facebook Watch seem to be not into edgy content in this way, which, I mean, we're saying edgy content, but you're just dealing with real things.
For sure, yeah.
That need to be dealt with. So I don't see why you wouldn't pitch this as a TV show. It kind of already is one.
Yeah, that's an option. But tell me this: do you think with that we would have to redevelop, right? Do you think a Netflix or a Hulu would come and say, "Look, we will continue what you have started," and in terms of story,
I think you have to be open to things not being completely the same as what you've started, right? So there does need to be an element of thinking about where does this go. You've already had 2 seasons online. What is the difference when it becomes, more of a traditional episodic series? Where do you see it going at least 2 to 3 seasons forward? And, I think a big thing is, what do you see, or who are some EP showrunner type folks that you get attached to this that would make a network comfortable with, investing in the project?
Awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's on the table.
I mean,
the beautiful thing about Giants is it's opened up so many doors for me as a creative. So I actually wrote another show in between season 1 and 2 of Giants that I'm currently developing. And so Giants is my baby. And it's been a calling card, not only for myself, but our entire team. And so I want to see Giants continue because it's had such a positive impact on our viewing audience. But it's really figuring out the business model, behind it. And then also, even when I've been having these conversations with networks, folks always want to know, what else do you have? It's almost like what I've found from studios and from networks, they would love to take something from scratch and develop it versus taking a pre-existing, IP or piece of content and, putting it in the traditional or the linear type of model. And so folks have always asked, Giants has opened up the door, and then once I get into the room, it's what else do you have? What else are you working on? Do you have any other scripts? Have you developed any other shows? And so I've really used Giants as a platform, as a launching pad, and I think I'm gonna keep Giants independent. I wanna retain that ownership, of the show and figure out a way for it to continue to live. And so one option is turning it into a film where instead of doing a third season, we do an indie film where we continue, these stories of the characters, and we already have this built-in audience, and we produce and then distribute this independent film that can go to theaters and then ultimately still land on a Netflix or a Hulu. And we know that motto sometimes is a bit more, I guess, folks understand that motto a bit more in terms of the indie film. Yeah.
I like the film route.
Like that? Okay.
Yeah. I approve.
You want to produce it?
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fund it. You want to fund it?
Yeah. No, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
I can see it at Macro. Yeah.
I am not saying anything that could be construed as a contract, but no, we should definitely talk about it for sure. Because I'm very curious. Okay, so I want to make sure we get audience questions. Okay, I think we can start now. Is there anything else that you think you want me to ask? As I feel like we touched on all of our.
Yeah, so I'm developing a half-hour dramedy with Gunpowder and Sky. It's a production company. We're preparing to pitch, really soon. And that's been a really long process. Like I said, I wrote this script initially after season 1 of Giants. We did season 2, and then we went into this development situation, and we've been developing for an entire year of rewrites, of working on a Bible, working on a pitch deck, and now we're in the process of attaching folks, looking for a EP, a showrunner, or a director before we actually go to networks. And so I'm really excited about that project.
Tell us what it's about.
It's called Trade, and it's a half-hour romantic dramedy about the everyday experiences and romantic love affairs of a guy named Julian Woods. He's a masculine gay man that passes for straight, and he's learning to embrace his sexuality with the help of his outlandish friends. He's the co-owner of a burgeoning barbershop in Washington, D.C., and so we watch him go through the highs and lows of entrepreneurship while working out his own toxic masculinity.
Nice. You have scripts?
Yeah.
Let's talk. That sounds really interesting. You're doing so much. You're creating. You're hustling. You're doing the damn thing. How do you find your peace?
It's a really good question. I center myself. I find ways to center myself, and whether that's waking up in the morning and removing social media, that's a big thing for me. I literally put into the universe recently that I wanted to spend less time on my phone, and somebody stole my phone. Yeah.
Ask and you shall receive.
And so I found my peace by disconnecting to all of the things that are going on externally and just going inwardly. And sometimes that's at the spa, sitting in the hot tub. Sometimes that's going to Runyon Canyon, and hiking. Sometimes it's just having a conversation with friends. But most of the time it's finding that alone time and just being still. And I always find my peace in a very still place. Yeah.
Well, on behalf of SAG-AFTRA, I'd like to thank Aaliyah and James. Thank you for the invaluable advice. Yes.